The greatest threat to freedom isn't evil, it's obedience, not malice, but mental sleep. And the most terrifying part? It doesn't come from the uneducated, it infects the brilliant, the good, the kind. Stupidity, as Bonhoeffer warned, isn't the absence of intelligence. It's the refusal to think when thinking becomes costly. The smartest people are falling first. We like to think stupidity belongs to the uneducated, to the misinformed, to the fringe, but the truth is more disturbing. Stupidity infects the brilliant. It reaches professors, doctors, engineers, journalists, the ones who speak well, who know the data, who've read the books. Bonhoeffer understood something most people still don't. Moral collapse doesn't begin with evil. It begins with the refusal to think. It begins when the mind quietly steps back and lets the crowd, the party, the authority do the work. It looks normal, it sounds intelligent, but something has shut off, and by the time anyone notices, it's already done irreversible damage. In 1961, Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment. Participants were told they were helping with a study on memory. Their job? Administer electric shocks to another person when they answered a question incorrectly. They didn't know the shocks weren't real. They didn't know the person being shocked was an actor. They just knew that each mistake required a more intense jolt, more pain, more screams. The results? 65% of participants delivered what they believed were fatal shocks simply because they were told to. These weren't sadists. They were normal people, smart, educated, polite, and that's what makes it terrifying. These weren't monsters. These were minds that stopped moving. They heard the screams. They felt the discomfort, but they handed their thinking to someone else. Bonhoeffer watched this happen long before the experiment. He lived through Nazi Germany, not as a passive observer, but as a man who tried to wake people up while they were sleepwalking into destruction. He watched clergy bless genocide. He watched professors teach propaganda. He watched loving parents support a regime that would later execute their own children. And what haunted him wasn't the brutality of evil. It was the quiet compliance of decent people who refused to question what they were told. He realized something few had the courage to say. The most dangerous force in society isn't hatred. It's borrowed thought. It's the citizen who stops verifying, the thinker who stops thinking, the educated man who repeats slogans because it's easier than asking questions. Stupidity, as Bonhoeffer defined it, was not the lack of intelligence. It was the absence of intellectual independence, and that absence is how good people become instruments of harm. Bonhoeffer saw it before it had a name. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wasn't some academic theorizing from a distance. He lived it, felt it, was crushed by it. Born in 1906 into a highly intellectual German family, his father a prominent psychiatrist, his siblings scholars and scientists, Bonhoeffer had every reason to believe in the power of education, of reason, of rational debate. But then he watched the world he believed in dissolve. Nazi ideology didn't seduce the stupid, it seduced the intelligent. Professors, theologians, scientists, men of high culture and learning began parroting propaganda, defending tyranny, applauding moral atrocities, not because they were evil, but because they stopped thinking for themselves. Bonhoeffer watched it unfold in churches, pastors repeating state lies from the pulpit. He saw friends, colleagues, mentors, people he admired, abandon their principles in the name of unity, loyalty, nationalism, faith. It wasn't hate that drove them. It was the safety of obedience. It was the comfort of conformity. And that's when Bonhoeffer began writing something few were prepared to hear. From his prison cell, where he was held for plotting against Hitler, he wrote, "Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears." He wasn't just venting, he was naming a new enemy. Bonhoeffer realized that evil can be fought. It shows its teeth. It provokes opposition. It burns fast and dies violently. But stupidity? Stupidity is passive, polite, agreeable. It doesn't march in yelling. It blends in with bureaucracy, tradition, slogans, small talk, policy. It believes it's doing good. That's what makes it so dangerous. The evil can be exposed. The stupid resist correction because they think they're doing good. This was Bonhoeffer's most terrifying observation, that a stupid man when taken over by collective thought, is no longer an individual. He becomes a channel for ideas he didn't examine, doesn't understand, and cannot defend. Bonhoeffer called this a kind of possession. You don't speak to the man anymore. You speak to his programming, his slogans, his selected sound bites. He becomes not an enemy, but a vessel. You cannot reason with him because he no longer reasons with himself. This is what Bonhoeffer faced in Germany. Not an army of monsters, an army of obedient minds, and that, he believed, was how evil truly wins. Not by overpowering good, but by convincing intelligent people to turn off their minds and call it virtue. Obedience is easier than thought. Bonhoeffer didn't blame stupidity on low intelligence. He knew better. He understood something deeper, something far more uncomfortable, that most people don't lose their minds because they're incapable. They lose them because it's easier. Thinking is hard. Obedience is easy. And in a world that's constantly pressuring your nervous system, obedience starts to feel like survival. This is what modern psychologists now call functional stupidity, the act of mental self-abandonment under pressure. You stop asking questions. You stop evaluating risk. You outsource your thinking to whatever authority feels safe because your brain's overwhelmed and you just need to get through the day. Stress, debt, information overload, burnout, endless notifications, economic insecurity, outrage from every screen. It becomes rational to stop thinking. It becomes efficient, safer. Why study nuance when headlines tell you how to feel? Why research policy when slogans give you certainty in 5 words or less? Why argue with friends when agreeing keeps the peace? This is the system, and the system rewards it. Social media platforms don't want careful thinkers. They want reactors. They want people who comment before they verify, who share before they reflect, who attack before they pause. Outrage gets clicks. Clicks mean ad revenue, and ad revenue drives everything. News outlets aren't built to inform you. They're built to keep you angry, because anger holds attention longer than curiosity. Political campaigns don't want to explain complexity. They want to hand you a villain and a catchphrase, and if you're overwhelmed enough, you'll take it. This is what Bonhoeffer was naming before modern science could prove it. He saw that when life becomes unstable, the brain doesn't seek truth, it seeks relief, and that's the key line. The brain surrenders first to survive, then forgets it ever had a choice. You don't notice when it happens. You just start repeating things. You feel smart, informed, right, but it's not thought. It's obedience dressed in confidence. And because it feels certain, you never question how hollow it's become. This isn't a bug in the system. It is the system. Because a society full of obedient minds is easier to manage than a society full of independent thinkers willing to slow down, dig deeper, and say, wait, that doesn't make sense. But we don't say it. Not when we're drowning, not when it's easier to go along, not when the cost of thinking feels higher than the comfort of being wrong. Groupthink is the real virus. Stupidity isn't just psychological, it's sociological. Bonhoeffer saw it before it had a name, that the most dangerous ideas don't rise from a single mind, but from many minds thinking the same way for the wrong reason. It's called groupthink, and it's not just dangerous, it's contagious. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch ran a simple experiment. He put people in a room, showed them a line, and asked them to choose which of 3 comparison lines matched in length. It was obvious, but everyone else in the room was in on it, and they all gave the wrong answer on purpose. The result? 75% of real participants conformed, at least once, knowing they were wrong. Why? Not because they were dumb, because they were human. We don't fear being wrong, we fear being alone. And when the group moves, our survival instincts say, follow. Bonhoeffer saw this in churches, universities, public squares. He watched intelligent people abandon their values just to avoid being outcast, just to keep their seat at the table. And today, it's worse, because now you don't need a room full of people. You just need an algorithm. Your social media feed is a psychological weapon. It shows you what you already believe. It rewards your outrage. It filters out dissent. It becomes an echo chamber that feels like a mirror, but is actually a trap. You scroll and scroll and scroll, and every post says, you're right, they're wrong. Don't think, just react. And that's the moment groupthink wins. Not because you were forced, but because you were fed. Bonhoeffer's insight was this: the stupidest decisions feel right, because everyone else is making them too. It's not logic, It's comfort, and we chase comfort faster than we chase truth. You start to parrot what your tribe says. You stop asking hard questions. You attack what your group attacks. You fear the silence that follows dissent more than the consequences of being wrong. And just like that, you've surrendered. Not to tyranny, not to fear, but to belonging. Bonhoeffer understood this wasn't a glitch in human nature. It was the default. And unless you fight it, you'll join the crowd believing you're thinking while doing anything but. The digital age has weaponized stupidity. What tyrants once tried to do with guns and propaganda, algorithms now accomplish with precision. Totalitarian regimes had to burn books, censor speech, police thought. Now, we do it to ourselves. Voluntarily, every scroll, every click, every post, because the war on thought isn't being fought with violence, it's being fought with dopamine, and the battlefield is your feed. In 2018, MIT researchers found that false information spread 6 times faster than the truth on social media. Why? Because lies are crafted to feel good. Truth requires effort. Emotion spreads. Logic stalls. The platforms aren't broken, they're working perfectly. Their goal isn't to inform you, it's to keep you engaged, hooked, addicted. Outrage drives clicks, clicks drive revenue, and revenue is the god they all serve. So if rage keeps you online, if certainty keeps you scrolling, if tribal warfare keeps you posting, then the algorithm is going to feed that fire until it burns your mind to ash. This isn't just manipulation, this is weaponized cognition. Every time you engage with something reactive, you train the machine, and in return, the machine trains you. AI doesn't need to convince you. It just needs to feed you what keeps your emotional circuits on fire. And here's the scariest part. It's not even doing it maliciously. It's doing it mathematically. You're not being lied to. You're being profiled, predicted, pushed, not by ideology, but by code, by systems designed to harvest attention. Not truth. You're not uninformed. You're being outthought by a machine. This is what Bonhoeffer never saw coming. He warned us about blind obedience, groupthink, the comfort of stupidity in the face of danger. But he never lived to see the digital age, where obedience isn't demanded. It's designed, where slogans aren't shouted from podiums. They're embedded into memes, into comment sections, into curated outrage served on a screen you scroll half asleep. The algorithm doesn't care what's true. It cares what spreads. And what spreads is what divides, what addicts, what erodes thought and replaces it with performance. What started as social media has become social engineering, and unless you learn to see the pattern, you'll spend your life thinking you're informed when you've only been emotionally farmed. We used to fear censorship. Now the real threat is stimulation. Too much noise, too little thought, and no time to tell the difference. The mind is losing to the machine. Your brain wasn't built for truth. It was built for survival. And survival, biologically, means speed. It means shortcuts. It means choosing what feels right, not what is right. Your ancestors didn't need nuance. They needed certainty. Fast. Run or stay. Friend or threat. Belong or die. This is the legacy we carry. Not logical calculators, but reactive survival engines wearing the costume of intellect. And that's what makes modern stupidity so dangerous. It doesn't come from a lack of intelligence. It comes from overwhelmed systems reverting to default wiring. We weren't designed to process thousands of headlines a day, to hold multiple conflicting ideas, to remain rational while under chronic stress. So when the world overloads you, your brain does what it's trained to do. Shut down complexity. Choose sides. Seek comfort. Outsource thought. Bonhoeffer called this possession. In his words, one feels that one is no longer speaking to a person, but to slogans that have taken possession of him. He didn't have the language of neuroscience, but he didn't need it. He saw the transformation with his own eyes. People stop being people. They become channels for ideology, for groupthink, for carefully engineered narratives they never chose, but now defend like gospel. And modern science confirms what Bonhoeffer feared. Cognitive dissonance studies show that when people are presented with information that challenges their beliefs, they often double down, not because they're irrational, but because their brains perceive the discomfort as threat. The more invested you are in being right, the more violently your mind rejects correction. And in a world of endless inputs, you'll always find a comforting source that tells you you're still right. Don't think too hard. That's why the greatest threat today isn't misinformation. It's our willingness to believe it. Because belief, once it feels good, becomes harder to surrender than truth is to prove. This is what Bonhoeffer tried to warn us about. But now, the danger is amplified. We're not just battling ideology, we're battling algorithms, AI, dopamine feedback loops, a system designed to make the shortcut not just available, but addictive, and most minds lose unless they train. So what's the resistance? What can one person do in a system engineered to dull their edge? You start with 4 weapons. 1. Intellectual friction. Read things you disagree with, not to change your mind, but to test it. Expose your ideas to pressure and see what survives. 2. Say, I don't know. It's not a weakness. It's a shield. In a world of instant opinions, admitting uncertainty is the first step toward real strength. 3. Delay your reactions. Outrage wants speed. Truth needs time. Pause before you post, before you argue, before you decide what side you're on. 4. Disconnect from echo chambers. If everything you consume agrees with you, you're not thinking. You're being trained. Walk out of the loop, even if it costs you comfort, especially if it costs you certainty. Because here's the truth no one sells you. Thinking hurts, and that's why so few people do it. It's easier to repeat, to believe, to join. But Bonhoeffer understood this. Functional stupidity whispers, you already know, and that's when you stop being human. You become a machine in a system of machines, reacting, consuming, obeying. But you don't have to. You can choose friction. You can choose discomfort. You can choose clarity over convenience. And in that choice, you reclaim your mind. Who stands fast? In his prison cell, waiting to die, Bonhoeffer didn't ask, who's the smartest? Who's the most educated? Who sees the truth? He asked something deeper. Who stands fast? When the noise rises, when the slogans echo, when silence is safer than truth, who still thinks? Who still sees? Who still speaks? It's a brutal question, because the answer isn't what we want it to be. It's not intelligence. It's not credentials, it's not some genetic gift of clarity, it's courage, and more importantly, discipline. Because thinking clearly isn't a trait, it's a practice. You're not born with it, you build it, in silence, in resistance, in moments no one sees. It starts the first time you pause before reposting that headline, before joining that chant, before accepting that comforting belief you've never challenged. You feel the friction, and instead of numbing it, you stay with it. That's what standing fast looks like. Not heroism, not volume, just stillness in a room that's vibrating with blind agreement. And here's the hardest part. It's lonely, it's slow, and it doesn't come with applause. You won't be celebrated for resisting groupthink. You'll be ignored, misunderstood, mocked, because when you stop obeying the emotional patterns of the crowd, you break the rhythm. And the crowd doesn't like broken rhythm, but Bonhoeffer's challenge remains. Who stands fast? Not when it's easy, but when it's invisible, when no one's watching, when the only person who knows you told the truth is you. This is the man Bonhoeffer was. Not flawless, not perfect, but clear. Willing to die not just for what he believed, but for his right to keep believing it. And you? You don't need to be a philosopher or martyr. You don't need to memorize arguments or win debates. You just need to stay human in a world designed to make you stop thinking. Because that's how the mind dies. Not in war, not in tragedy, in comfort, in scrolling, in nodding, in choosing speed over depth, emotion over evidence, performance over principle. And if you're still here, still thinking, then maybe you already know the truth. Bonhoeffer's question isn't for history, it's for now. Who stands fast when everyone else has stopped thinking? Bonhoeffer's final warning, stay human. On April 9, 1945, just weeks before Germany's surrender, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was led to the gallows in a Nazi prison camp. He had been offered chances to recant, to apologize, to conform. He chose death, and according to a fellow prisoner, his final words were simple. This is the end. For me, the beginning of life. Bonhoeffer didn't die because he hated the regime. He died because he refused to hand over his mind. Because even as the world around him collapsed into groupthink and slogans, even as the churches bowed, the universities complied, and his friends repeated lies to stay safe, he stood fast. Not because he wanted to be a martyr, but because he understood something most people still don't. Mental freedom is not a gift, it's a discipline, a daily resistance. a lifelong war against the comfort of conformity. Bonhoeffer saw what happens when good people stop thinking, when intelligent people become megaphones for whatever authority feeds them, when the fear of isolation outweighs the cost of being wrong, and he gave everything, his voice, his body, his future, to warn us. And yet here we are, in a world more connected than ever, but somehow more thoughtless, more reactive, more compliant. Our enemies don't come wearing uniforms. They come wearing convenience. We are being numbed, not by propaganda, but by ease, not silenced by censorship, but by speed, by algorithm, by overload. And the worst part? We're calling it freedom. We're calling it progress when we can't hold a thought for longer than 15 seconds. We're calling it connection when we only speak in headlines and hashtags. We're calling it intelligence when it's just tribal repetition of what makes us feel good. Bonhoeffer's warning was never more relevant than it is right now, because the threat today isn't a dictator, it's distraction. It's the slow erosion of clarity, choice by choice, click by click, until you're no longer thinking, you're just reacting. But here's where the power returns. If stupidity is partly chosen, then clarity can be chosen too. If the mind can surrender, then the mind can also stand up, right now. Not with noise, but with a single act of courage. To think slowly when everyone else rushes. To say, I don't know, when the mob demands certainty. To study both sides before picking one. To press pause before reposting rage. To break the loop. This is not about superiority. This is about survival, because every system around you profits when you stop thinking. And every moment you choose clarity, you become the resistance. So here's the challenge. What's one belief you hold that you're willing to challenge this week? Not to torture yourself, not to abandon truth, but to test if what you believe is actually yours or just what you were told. Because Bonhoeffer didn't die trying to prove he was right. He died protecting the space to keep asking. And if you still have that space, don't waste it. Guard it. You weren't born to comply. You were born to confront. And in a world built to seduce your mind into silence, every time you think clearly, you win.